Hello, hello. Good morning, good afternoon, and good night to folks who are joining the webinar here. I'm super excited to get started and get the conversation going about all things Web3 and developer community building. We're just going to give it 2 or 3 minutes here for the rest of the audience to join, and we'll be kicking off shortly. Thanks so much for coming in and start getting those questions ready for the last third of the time together here. Okay, we're at 2 minutes past the hour, so we're going to kick off here. I am going to, quickly introduce our webinar and our event here, and then hand over to our three fantastic panelists to share, a little bit about their backgrounds, what their company does, or their organization does, what their DAO does in this space. Maybe share some insights on, their interest and their reason for wanting to build and engage a developer community. Then we'll go into some general Q&A and pick up some questions from the audience towards the end. So hello, welcome. Thank you for joining us today. This is MLH webinar, and we're going to be focusing on how to build a thriving Web3 developer community. So why is MLH hosting a webinar about building a Web3 developer community, you might ask? We've been working with tech companies to build out their brand awareness, product adoption, open source projects, and so much more for the last decade or so, all focused on engaging our community of early career developers from around the world, which is the largest certainly that we're aware of. A lot of work in the last couple of years has centered around building developer communities for Web3. So, what does that mean? What are the priorities? Why is this industry so interested in this space? That's what we're really here to find out more about. But just to kick us off with one of my favorite statistics about our community, when we went out and asked our community, have you ever built an app using blockchain or Web3 technologies? Less than 15%, said yes, but over 56% said no, but they plan to over the next year. So, almost 3 out of 5 early career developers are planning to build their first Web3 app. And that's really the market that we're here to talk about. Without any further ado, I'm going to pass over to Laura, just to give a quick intro and background to herself and to Nia.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Really excited to be here and to have this conversation with you all. So my name is Laura. I am from the KIPP Foundation, and I built and am leading a team within the Near Foundation called Near Horizon, which is specifically focused on supporting early stage founders in being successful. So really sort of taking off in their business. And my background, so I've been really focused on kind of the intersection of education and technology with the goal of expanding access for all, and particularly people who are underrepresented traditionally kind of, in the world. And so I started my career in management and technology consulting, have worked in city government in the New York City Department of Education under Bloomberg, national nonprofit K-12 organization, and then co-founded a really early stage, obviously, startup and EdTech startup, and then worked at a Series C EdTech startup as well before joining Near. So the majority of my past has been in the Web2 space, but Web3, I think the reason why I became obsessed with Web3 is because of this promise of, I think, opportunity for everyone, the idea that you can really participate meaningfully in governance and actually own your data and your assets and your identity, I think is the future and is required in order for us to change the imbalances that exist in the world. So I was really philosophically very aligned with the space and excited to contribute. So that's a bit about me.
Perfect. Happy to go next here. Yeah, everyone, hello. My name is Michael Powell. I'm here with Immutable, but quickly, just a little background on me. I have spent time at Xbox and at Instagram before coming to Immutable. And Immutable is really a Web3 game development platform. We make it easy for game studios to integrate digital asset ownership into their games, and also aim to remove a lot of the friction of the end user and the gamer experience throughout that process as well. So speaking to a bit of a similar stat that Max brought up earlier, but actually we've seen that 75% of game developers plan to build in Web3 over the next 5 years, and that's really the audience that we're trying to capture.
Awesome. Fantastic intros, Michael and Laura. Super happy to be here with you guys, and thank you, Max. My name is Al Lucan. I'm a DevRel currently at Alchemy. For those who are unaware, Alchemy is a Web3 development platform. So our main product is we do node providing. So if you are building any application that has any sort of blockchain data, you probably will have some sort of use for Alchemy, because Alchemy kind of, the blockchain is not an easy, indexable, searchable database. It wasn't designed for that. It was designed for immutability, not for ease of use or UX like we're used to in Web2 DBs. So Alchemy kind of sneaks in there and goes, you don't have to deal with that shortcoming of design. Just deal with us. And so yeah, we build products all across the developer stack. I focus a lot on community, but also have spent a lot of time focusing on as well EdTech, which I don't call it too often, but I should more. And after today's panel, probably will use it a lot. But spend a lot of time shipping the Alchemy University product. Prior to Alchemy, I worked at an EdTech startup called ChainShot. We would do Web3 developer boot camps. So we'd teach you the Ethereum stack 0 to 100. And I actually really liked it because we're actually not teaching you how to do Web3. We're teaching you how to do computer science via Web3. It's like taking a college class in, I don't know, neural networking or whatever. It's a computer science class, but it's focused on something. So that startup, we would do, in-person boot camps to teach folks. That startup was acquired by Alchemy and turned into Alchemy University. So Alchemy University is out there. And yeah, super excited to talk community today with all of you guys.
Awesome. So first question for you all, why does community matter? It might seem obvious to many of the folks on the call here, but I'd love to hear it, in all of your own words, why you care about building a developer community.
Yeah, amazing. I'll kick us off there. And I actually love this question, actually. So I think that why this matters, right, is that having a thriving developer and founder community is actually the lifeblood of an ecosystem, or a DApp, or a protocol. They are the ones, you all are the ones who are innovating, pushing the boundaries of the technology, contributing to new standards, and new use cases. And I think really importantly, given and very differently than in Web2, you're also really making decisions about the future of the protocol or the community and organization. And one of the things I think that I've been reflecting on is just how much it matters, the type of person you have in your community. And you need people who are ethos aligned and really committed to the mission and vision of what you're building, and who are committed to one another as well. And so the community actually really needs to be able to answer this question of why community matters, like just as much as the people that are facilitating it. So that's why I actually really like this question.
That's both a decentralized and recursive answer, Laura. I love it.
Yeah, absolutely agree. I think there's obviously a lot of different answers here, and we could probably talk about this for the entire hour. But I think to hone in on one for me, and this may come across a little bit selfish, so I apologize if it does, but our developer community honestly really keeps us on track. It like helps us know that we're actually building the right things, right? So that kind of testing and iterating process, making sure that we're including very diverse perspectives in our product release process, has been extremely helpful to Immutable. Whether it's through kind of an early access program offering where we show prototypes or wireframes just to get early feedback on things, to do some of the user research involved in the work that we're doing a little bit further upstream, has been incredibly helpful to make sure, hey, is this actually solving real problems? And are we building something that's going to land well once we actually push it live?
Nice. Yeah, I'll give a quick answer here too. Why community matters. I think the straight answer is like it's just business sense. Most of us here deal with developers at a base level. So, establishing communities relevant to your company and your organization and your product line, it just makes business sense. Also, I like to think of a community as a big factor for scaling. So we have an educational product and it's fully asynchronous. It's 8 weeks worth of content. So it's just a very kind of drab experience if you just kind of do it all yourself. And you'll still get a lot of the learning out of it. That's great. But a lot of the early design we did for, at least for Alchemy University, was making sure we paired a very strong community element to help the asynchronicity of the course. Like we built this course so that 10,000 to 100,000 people will get through it, but we made sure to design in a strong community element so that as people are going through the course, learning, they know where to turn if they have questions, if they want to meet others, if they want to network, if they want to build, if they want to get ideas. All of these intents are supposed to be captured by our community vertical. So we actually host a lot of our community in Discord, probably as most of you do here, and we see it as that very scalable. It's thanks to that kind of pillar that we set up that actually not just 100,000 people can do it, it's 1 million people, and so on and so on. It kind of just feeds in itself. So yeah.
Yeah, I think the thing I'll pick up on there, Al, is that idea of getting a million developers. For a long time, the whole kind of Web3 and blockchain world was talking about, we've got to get our first billion users, right? And that still is probably written on the walls in a lot of offices or co-working spaces. But I think there's been a quick realization in the last year that to get 1 billion users, you probably need 1 million developers. Yeah, love to dig in a little bit more around anything in all of your experiences where you've seen that the Web3 space is different, is special. Both positively. Maybe there's been a resetting of the the baseline level of experience, something like that. But also some of the blockers that you've encountered.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think some of the blockers are probably not dissimilar to starting a community in Web 2, but I think some of them really meaningfully are. And so I think what I've seen, obviously, there's like the solving for the cold start problem. I think another one is misaligned incentives and mercenaries, which I think is particularly, a Web3 problem. Tribalism, which I think also is deeply, sort of ingrained in the Web3 space, which I think can actually be sometimes a benefit, but also a deep challenge. And then I think Web2 marketing tactics actually are like a huge no-no in terms of trying to like recruit and bring people in. And then I think also specific to Web3 is that there is still a public perception challenge. I think, just to like call a spade. And so just to sort of go deeper on two of these, I think one of the aspects of Web3 that's been most surprising to me is that because so many protocols and sort of ecosystems got started via a grants program, that really tied money to building, it's, I think, created a really extractive culture where there's this baseline expectation that you should, continue to get money instead of actually wanting to just build on the tech because it allows you to add value to users in a superior way to Web 2 tech, right? And like it has all these unlocks. So I think that is a challenge. And then I think in terms of perception, at some point we actually did a survey with a bunch of Rust developers, and there was a strong allergic reaction to the blockchain space. And so I think it can be really divisive. I think and that makes really having people that are sort of values and mission aligned even more important than ever. Really understanding and being in it to really build the open web and understand what that means. So yeah, a couple of thoughts there.
Yeah, I think those are awesome points. I completely agree. And I think just to kind of add on to that in terms of some of the challenges, maintaining the fidelity of that audience, right? I think as Laura called out, there's oftentimes when we, potentially get speculative devs, or you get token holders or investors or traders, people who may not, necessarily have the same intention as other people in the community, and making sure that you're speaking to the right audience and not over-indexing on the loudest voices in the community, who may not necessarily be the people that you want to cater to at the end of the day. I think on the flip side, there are obviously positives too in the Web3 space that come along with this, and in an environment where a lot of the work that we're doing is open source, and kind of you can think about it as like a Lego environment, right? Where there's these building blocks that our community has been able to put into place, where they're actually able to materially contribute to the ecosystem itself by, working on indexers, or working on different elements of the community. We've seen folks in the community actually build like a deck builder marketplace for one of our games as well. So examples like that, right, where they're actually providing real value to other folks in the community by solving a problem, more so than I've seen in more traditional Web 2 areas.
Love it. And yeah, I keep thinking for blocker, I keep thinking, and this concept might come up more in today's discussion, but because I use it a lot to teach what Ethereum is like. I always call it, it's like the Wild West. It's like an internet version of the Wild West, where Web 2 is not Wild West akin. It's more of Web 2 is a walled garden. Web 3 is the Wild West. There's no walls. So with the Wild West, setting, you do inherit some of that Wild Westiness. For example, you want to set up a DAO with your community, and on paper it sounds like a great idea. You do one share per vote, so like you can do like an NFT, and each person, you can do all the Sybil resistance design that you want. So each person gets an NFT, and that NFT gets a vote over the DAO's treasury. Simple enough. But then that, like, DAOs and Web3 infras are permanent. You can't shut them down after a year because you didn't like something that the DAO did, or you didn't, that's just like long-term considerations. But also, like, in the short term, the DAO mechanics can override what you're trying to do. So say you get 6 of 10 bad actors in your DAO, you've lost potential control over a DAO closely tied to your product and organization and company, and it can go haywire, and there's nothing you can do about it. It's the Wild West. So that's a big kind of blocker for me as we think about creation of Web3 communities. There's a lot of game theory involved. There's a lot of tokenomics involved, and it's really tough once you run into that, like the permanence fact. Like, unless you program in some sort of self-destruct to the DAO and tell your community this DAO will end in a year, sure, that's like a hedge, but it just doesn't really work. So I'll do kind of blocker equals a lot of game theory thinking here for what would commonly be a little simpler, in my opinion, for Web 2.
Awesome, like great to hear. I think a lot of communities, and something what we've seen in community development is, the lifeblood of that community is is the doorway, is how people get into it. A lot of the focus that we've certainly seen in the Web3 space around community building is on enablement and education. It's getting people from a range of different backgrounds, ready to contribute and perhaps even commit in the longer term to a community or a tech stack or a product. Love to just get thoughts on how education and developer enablement are really key to growing the communities. I think there's a lot of education backgrounds here, so that intersection of ed and tech, or tech and ed, whichever way around you want to put it. Love to get some thoughts on that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's interesting because you can sort of think of it as there's this whole like EdTech sector, right? Like, which Al was talking about earlier, and I've also spent a great deal of my career in, and I think there's like a ton of benefit when you meaningfully integrate technology into education. So when it comes to personalization, when it comes to, being able to bring people together across the world to contribute in a community towards, when it comes to pair programming, right? There's all of these tools that we now have, I think, that are really, really meaningful. And obviously the whole kind of ed tech sector is really focused on building that and trying to disrupt, traditional education that I think we all can acknowledge has its challenges. But I think in terms of leveraging education as kind of a mechanism for community building, I think it's actually one of the most powerful and kind of necessary onboarding tools for a developer community. And of course, the challenge is then like continued engagement and actually translating that momentum from the educational experience into building valuable and lasting projects and products. And I think that's really where like the community part comes in. So interest in amazing tech, high quality education experiences kind of bring you in, I think, and then it's the community that makes you stay. And I actually think that's why the Major League Hacking model is so successful, because you combine, education with community. And so you have a sense of accountability for your experience that's beyond just you as an individual. So I think that's huge. And I think that's really informed us in building Horizon 2, which again, our focus is really on founders, but really we think of ourselves as kind of a learning community. So we privilege ethos and values alignment, and then really try to give our founders kind of deeply tactical and useful learning experiences that they can kind of immediately apply. So again, really appreciate the work that you all do at MLH, and I actually think you're a hugely impactful kind of model for how to do this right.
That's great to hear, Laura. Thanks so much. Michael, I think when we first spoke a few months ago, you said something like, your organization is flipping its focus to the top of funnel developers. Love to learn some more about that. I think one of the things Immutable's been incredibly successful at is creating a lot of abstractions and SDKs to make that onboarding process pretty easy. But I'm sure there's much more to it than that. Love to hear a bit more about what goes on under the covers.
Absolutely, yeah, and that may have been a comment that was biased by my standing within the marketing team. So we absolutely are still emphasizing that kind of end of journey education component as well. But specifically when it comes to my role, right? And I think what many people see in this space is 70 to 80% of kind of that consideration or purchasing journey phase actually happens before a developer or a game studio or your end user even really registers on your kind of funnel or your radar, right? Like they're poking around, they're smart people, they're doing research, they're taking a look at your website, your developer documentation. So we are trying to incorporate as much education as we can and content as we can kind of around that process, with the understanding that before folks even reach out to us or get in touch with us, they're going to know their stuff, right? And I think Laura brought up the idea of personalization as well. And one of the products that we've been working on pretty intensely over the past few months has been this developer hub. And, kind of trying to balance the friction required to get data in a space where that's a little bit of a taboo term, and also like making sure that it's a very frictionless journey, right? So developers answer a couple of things and they go through this onboarding process where we can actually personalize content to them based on their needs, their objectives, the size of their team, etc., and make sure they have more of that handheld journey along the way. And then, Max, to your point, we get to a lot of the ways that we're trying to abstract away some of the smart contract and Solidity work with smart contracts through similar functionality, but through APIs, through SDKs, that we can then just provide a bit of a familiar process for folks who are transitioning from that Web 2 space into Web 3.
That transitioning phrase, I think, is key, right? Because it's certainly not a binary flip that people make from hardcore Web 2 to hardcore Web 3 at all. Al, I think love to get into both the story, briefly of Alchemy University and the gap that you guys filled there, but then also like the strategic value of that, right? Alchemy went out and made an acquisition there. Love to just get your picture on both of those angles.
For sure. So quick kind of recap of the acquisition. The startup that I mentioned, it was a very small startup. We were only four people. We do synchronous Ethereum boot camps. So they were 3 months, every day, 3 hours. We'd get on Discord, as an instructor. Cohorts ranged, in the early days, they were 5 to 10 folks in size. And then by the time we grew and scaled, there were 50, 60, 70 folks per cohort. We'd get on Discord and just do lecture of the day, Ethereum, so on and so on. So after 40 days, Alchemy liked that model, but they said, you need to scale it even more, even past the bounds of like synchronicity. So they said, we're purchasing you and all this educational content and material that you've built up. Your kind of mission is to make this digestible by a large scale and the factor of thousands. So that's kind of like the setting for Alchemy University. And then strategically, probably everyone on the team has different answers. I've always seen it as like a sustainability flywheel kind of mechanism, and this touches on topics that like both Michael and Laura have just mentioned. Michael with like the transition, I completely agree. It's never a binary switch. It's completely a transition. It's a journey until you actually like, it's a lot of boxes you have to tick off. Core understanding of basic fundamentals. What are consensus mechanisms? How do decentralized and distributed systems actually work, right? That's like checkbox number one. Then checkbox number two is actually like understanding all of this in the scope of a traditional application. So I just see it as like as a sustainability play. The Web3 developer pie, like we all know, it's small, and it's not really growing at I mean, like we need those pillars to grow it. So Outcome University is that kind of flywheel intended to get people in Web 2 and Web 2 devs. So I actually segment them into general kind of population, non-development folks, Web 2 devs, and then Web 3 devs. So Outcome University targets kind of those first two, even though we target everyone. So that Web 3 pie share increases, right? We get folks from Web 2 doing more Web 3 stuff, in which case we all kind of, that's what we're all trying to do so that our thesi play out, in what we're doing now. So strategic kind of sustainability flywheel.
Love it. The way education should always be thought about. So I guess if we focus a little bit more on how people are made aware of all of your organizations and the tech that you have available. What I think we're seeing a lot of is traditional product marketing, a lot of community-based efforts that might be around network effects, around partnerships and alliances, connecting different communities together. Love just do a quick round on how you're thinking about reaching people, and to Al's point on that sort of segmentation with different audiences, whether there are different audiences that you're thinking about and different approaches to reach them.
Yeah, awesome. So I think as we think about our strategy here at Near, I think partnerships are definitely a big part of that strategy, and we're kind of over the first sort of half of this year, because it allows us to gain access to people who haven't necessarily been exposed to Near, and to do that in a much more like deep and embedded way than just through like a Twitter space or other methods. So people are actually like really starting to build and getting to know the tech through that process. So partnerships for sure. I think like one of the other things that I think we've all been sort of circling around to is just like the importance of referrals and reputation and like direct connection. So for example, in our first cohort of Horizon, over 50% of the cohort are like net new builders to Near, and we've actually just accomplished that by having one-on-one conversations with founders and like deeply caring about them as people and what they're building. And I mean, definitely don't have all the answers here, but like appreciate like I think how we authentically like care about their success. So I think we think a lot about like earned media and like reputational virality, where it's actually not us who are bringing new founders into the community, but it's the community itself that's acting as like stewards and recruiters, and they're doing that based on their own experience.
Absolutely, Laura. Yeah, I think we have certainly seen that a lot too, right? Where it's like you can tell people how great you are, but once someone that they trust says, "Wow, you should really check out X, Y, and Z," that carries a lot more weight, right? So, I mean, yeah, we've been implementing several strategies from PR and events and partnerships, and recently more exploring more in the kind of the community heroes space, which I think is obviously relevant for this conversation, right? So community heroes, advocates, influencers, all kind of under that umbrella, but working with folks, whether it's on crypto Twitter or LinkedIn or events, and trying to plug into different communities that share our same values and ethos, and trying to provide those folks with the relevant content. And it doesn't always necessarily need to be kind of this like pay to play type of idea either. If you provide people with early access or compelling content or a little bit of an inside peek, sometimes that can be enough too. So we've seen a lot of value there. And then, we have a bit of a saying too. What's the fastest way to get 10 million followers? Well, it's to date someone who has 100 million followers, right? So obviously the partnership space comes in handy a lot too, right? So we've announced partnerships with both Polygon and Unity this year, which have yielded great results for us in terms of kind of onboarding new devs and new game studios. So those will continue to be a priority for Immutable.
Nice. Yeah, Michael agreed. Partnerships tend to play a huge role. Aligning incentives between two partners in the space that are kind of do very different things, but also kind of double dip the community aspect is quite useful. I will also say in smaller, more micro communities, Discord roles and badges played wonders. So if you're out there and you have like a Discord community of like 50 to 100 to 200, and you set up your Discord server right, and you have a high level of activity, roles on that Discord become super valuable. So all of a sudden you're standing out in a close-knit group of very impactful people. So I saw like Discord roles were actually nuts for community. And for AU, we've also done like NFTs. NFTs are kind of like a neat Web3 way of uniting your community. Like, oh, I'm an NFT holder of this NFT, and you are also one. So that makes us kind of like equals somehow. So yeah, I'll leave it there. We use NFTs, Discord roles, and creative partnerships to get out there.
Love that. Yeah, developers certainly love Discord. That seems to be the place where everyone's hanging out at this point. So I want to wrap it really with the question I mentioned at the beginning, which is all right, you built the content, you've done the enablement, you're out there on Discord, there's new developers flowing in a steady stream. How do you keep them and increase their level of engagement? I think what this boils down to is perhaps, how do you think about making your community special?
Yeah, I think this is like the $1 million question. And I feel like I'm not sure that anyone totally, or I certainly don't have like the silver bullet right answer, but some things that we're thinking about are, one is like having really clear pathing for people. So like some devs are really committed to becoming founders, which is fantastic. And like, so having a pathway for them, directly to get support in how to do that and how to build a company, especially as like, someone who might never have done that before. Then some devs, I think, want to contribute to like just the fully open source infrastructure. And so having a pathway there. At NEAR, we have a group called Dev Hub that really provides like support and connection for that type of developer. And then, there are some devs who are brilliant, but don't want to launch a company and they'd rather kind of work for someone else's project or on someone else's project. And so also providing kind of a pathway to just like find interesting projects in the ecosystem that are looking for support. So just making sure that like those pathways are clear, so you don't lose people who are basically like, oh, I don't know how to participate in this community. And then I think the second thing we're thinking a lot about, and it's very messy, is a real commitment to decentralization and like community ownership over decision making. So we're actually at NEAR amidst elections right now for our first founding members of our like community governance body. And the goal is to kind of like invert decision making from foundation making treasury decisions to the community doing that. And so I think when you own something, you like deeply care about it much more than if you don't and you aren't involved. And then I think the last thing that we think a lot about is just really like meaningful community building moments and like the importance of actually having facilitation of a community. Ideally, that actually starts to over time happen by community members organically, but I think it would be silly to think it would happen, at the beginning. And so, using IRL and virtual and you really like having people get to know each other on a human level and build friendships. And I think people tend to be loyal to other people, not even necessarily technology. And so how do you like kind of prioritize those moments of connection? So again, no silver bullet, but some things that we're thinking about.
Yeah, certainly no silver bullet here either, but obviously extremely important thing to bring up. And yeah, I think obviously extremely important to make sure that there's a opportunity for the community to find value, right? What are you offering them that's going to provide value to them? B, I think it's really important to make sure that your community feels heard. And then C, the point that Laura brought up at the end, I think probably the most important is actually the connectivity piece. Are you giving space and providing opportunity for people to connect with like-minded folks within the community. It's probably why they call it community anyway, right? So I think we've done a couple things at Immutable, like that. I brought up the early access program earlier, where folks get a chance to actually get kind of a sneak peek under the hood. And the most critical thing in that process has been actually closing the loop with folks and saying, look at what your feedback has translated to and how it's showing up across our work. And that has done extremely well for us in terms of making people get involved, increasing the amount of people who are interested in joining that group. So that's kind of on the value element, and obviously it's extremely helpful for us too. And then fun things that you can do around, like giving even a template for a meme and doing like a little contest of who can come up with the most creative meme, right? Like get people involved, engaged, and increase that level of connecting with other people in the space. And usually that leads to not only a lot of value, but a lot of fun.
Nice, fantastic answers. It just so many points here for, I don't know, community builders to pick out. Also, no silver bullet here, but I just kind of taking notes as you guys are answering. But it seems to be the consensus, because I'm in agreement for everything. You need to, as a community provider, provide value, space for networking, opportunities, or space for opportunities. One that I really like that Laura mentioned was clear UX. So that's something big, even in the Discord. Like we're all probably Discord owners. How like legible and navigable is that left side tab? That like basically runs your entire community, and how like intuitive is it? We're even at the point where we started like flow charting out these like user paths, right? So if you're a learner, you have to see these channels. If you are a dev needing help, you want to see these channels first, stuff like that. So clear UX is so important. Because then you go into some community and they have like their Discord and it's just a mess. It's like, where do you even start? You don't know what channel to bring your value to. So like, route the folks accordingly. And then I also like the IRL to URL symbiosis, making the online presence be really valuable, but connecting it with the real world somehow, whether that's through some hackathon or real world, even on Zoom, but getting them to actually talk to each other. And then one more specific one would be just do like a bounty program or a hackathon submission flow that requires like teams and some sort of team building element. It requires some sort of team matchmaking, because that's where the next like co-founders of the next big thing are gonna come out of. These types of things that we put together, people are meeting their next co-founder, their next best friend, their next like mortal enemy. It happens. So we need to set up that stage so that the community can prosper that way, for sure.
Awesome, thanks. And Al, thank you for providing a great summary. You've taken my job there. I think all of the stuff there, right, from creating special moments to creating like an ongoing flow for folks, but actually adding value around what people are doing, right? Build a project with people, build your network, build your community. Super valuable. I just want to give a call out to the audience here, to the attendees. If you have any burning questions, drop them in the chat. It's quiet so far, but very happy to take any questions for the panel here. They can be for the group as a whole, or for any individuals. If not, I've got so much more that I could ask all of the folks here about. One of the questions I'm going to throw out there is whether there are differences that you'll see around developers who are early career and they're learning like enterprise for the first time, with a good theoretical background, or folks who are really transitioning from Web 2 to Web 3. Do those people come in with different challenges, with different expectations of community? Love to get some thoughts about that. So I know that's a big segmentation that people think about. Love to get some thoughts on that from the group. Feel free to dive in, anyone who's got points in here.
Yeah, I mean, so I think there's definitely, obviously, differences from like a motivation standpoint and just like what you're kind of like a contextual standpoint, like what are you used to experiencing in terms of particularly around like the community piece. I mean, I think unless you are part of kind of an open source community before, it's actually kind of real like wildly different than building for a place like Amazon or Facebook or something like that. So I think it's just that kind of like need to really, again, I think it all comes down to kind of like that ethos piece of like, why are you here and why are you building, and getting people to like really think about that meaningfully. I feel like that's, to me, kind of one of the bigger differences. Be curious what others think.
Yeah. Happy to hop in here, and we have there's a bit of a funny thing that I can share too here, just around kind of how we've thought about different audience personas at Immutable, with 4 fun names. So we have AAA Trent, Decentro Dave, Indie Ivana, and After Hours Amy, and these all represent people, of varying skill sets at kind of places in their career and what their interests are, right? And so I think what Laura brought up was really around understanding the motivations of these users, and then again, right, trying to kind of match their expectations with the content and the community that we can enable for them. So, right, on one end, you have a very comparison-driven AAA Trent, right, who's thinking a lot about gas fees and cost, and the ability to enable like very high quality gameplay. And then on the other end, right, you have After Hours Amy, who's thinking about how does she actually build a community for herself around her game, and is there an opportunity for her to potentially get any funding involved here, or she needs to do a smaller primary sale to kind of keep that runway going. So trying to make sure that we're providing, again, that level of personalization in the content, so we can again, like, surface that value to people based on what they actually need.
Nice. Laura and Michael answered very comprehensively. So I will say the only thing I like, and not too relevant to the question here, but on developers, Web3 tech stacks tend to be very accessible. So that's also like a plus for us. Like Solidity is the easiest programming language in the world. And if you are onboarded to Web3 development, you're not really dealing with databases anymore, which is super nice and was a huge blocker to Web2 development. So that is also like a nice little up ramp. Just one more difference on the dev side that I'll throw out there that is relevant to us still.
Awesome. Well, I'm conscious that we're even just over time. I think tons of potential. Clearly, some real leadership in the room in terms of thinking about how to make it happen and driving those outcomes. Just from our perspective here, we're really excited to see 2/3 of our community having built their first Web3 app, and to have had a part in the story of them picking the products, the tools, the change that they're going to use for that, and building out their personal stack in terms of what combination of different tools and tech they want to use in their lives going ahead. So yeah, thanks everyone. Really appreciate all of the panelists here. Laura, Michael, Al, thanks so much for your time, and thank you to all of the attendees, our audience here who joined as well. Wish everyone a great day.
Looks like we actually had someone last minute raise their hand. Maybe someone shy. Do we have time for one last audience question?
Let's take one last audience question.
Why not? We're all here, right? All right. Let me... Is it Jeffrey?
Yeah, it's Jeff.
Oh, there you go. Go ahead.
Yeah, I say thank you for this session, but we can ask our question because the chat was disabled for attendees, and so we can write anything there.
Oh
So I
no.
raised my hand. I was wondering, is there and see if this one will be like enabled, but no.
You can, if anyone has a question, go ahead and you can unmute yourself, just like Jeffrey just turned it on. Sorry about that.
No worries. My question is about French community or French ecosystem. I'm from Togo, and here we are basically like French native speakers, but building a Web3 community here is very struggling and challenging. I don't know if these strategies will be applicable and like sustain in here in Togo or something like that. Yeah.
Well, I would be curious to learn more about sort of your perception of why it's challenging. Like, what are the kind of causes of that? And there's probably an element to it of just like that sort of cold start problem of like, how do you get your first, handful of people who really care? So without knowing like the intricacies of exactly what you think is going on, I think some thoughts are really starting small. Like, if you can honestly find 2 to 3 people who are really excited, like that's actually where it begins. And it's better to have a handful of people who really understand what you're trying to do versus hundreds who have kind of a peripheral connection. So I would say small is not always bad. And starting small is kind of the expectation. So like, are there ways that through joining, I don't know, university meetups or other kind of areas of innovation, you can kind of, bring people in and get them excited? A couple ideas for how you might think about it.
Yeah, just to add really quickly, we also have one of our most popular games called Cross the Ages is actually built by a team in France and does pretty well over there. So if you're interested in just tapping into, I know, a already pre-existing passionate Web3 community around Cross the Ages, I'm sure they would love to have you.
I'll just share a quick thought on here, which is a lot of regions that are trying to build out a community have done things like creating a geographic DAO, right? Like crypto, in a certain area, and that can be a real way of getting people involved. Voting rights and NFTs and those sorts of things can often excite people as much as, if not more than, a meetup. The next question we've got in the chat here is about finding partners. How do you find good partners, and what sort of things do you look for in when planning partnerships for your community?
One thing I'll say here real quick is this probably isn't a super relevant question to me, since I haven't really done too much partner search recently, so I can talk to like what I see happens in the community. But like personally, if I want to find a really good partner, I go out and see who is a force in the community. I'll shout out Chad, who is the founder of ETHSD, who is a regional group, and he's someone I would immediately partner with. He is he has a lot of experience like rallying local developers and just building community around that. And you can tell he's very passionate, and just his ethos around community and around upskilling people and providing value for their lives is something that immediately calls you. So all that to say, you should definitely find for that like innate call to someone, and never try to force any partnership, because that will result in some sort of community fork in the future. So for the sake of the community, make sure that the partner you find is someone you really vibe with all the way. Yeah.
All right.
And to the how, I was just going to say, sorry, to the how, join hackathons, to the how to find partners and expose yourself to that range of people. Just join hackathons, join teams.
Well, there's nothing we like to hear more at MLH than panelists telling folks to join hackathons. There's one more question in here that I'd like to put out to our panelists here, which is any tips for non-technical community leaders? So for people who are working in in DevRel, how can they think about this?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there can definitely feel like there's kind of like a perception and like realness challenge there in terms of that. So I think that to the extent to which you can actually kind of roll your sleeves up and actually start getting into the tech, even if you're not actually going to be a full-blown dev, but I think knowing enough so that you can at least feel like you have a leg to stand on is probably a good place to start. Would be one idea there. And then I think you also, I would say, like, also probably not undervaluing what you do bring to the table. So I think there are there's a lot of, like, obviously amazing technical experience within your community probably, but I'm sure that you bring other really interesting, maybe it's commercial skills or leadership skills or things like that. So really, like, doubling down on what you are really strong at and sort of lending that to the community as well.
Yeah, as someone who's certainly less technical than the folks in the community, I think it's always really helpful. You don't need to know all the answers, but at least know where to point people. So to what Laura said, like, you can have the resources at hand and lean on what your strengths are. And then oftentimes I found it very valuable to bring different product folks, different engineers, not only from Immutable, but also from the community as well, and highlight those folks and kind of get that conversation going within the community itself. So you don't need to be the expert there, right? There's other people within the community who can play that role, and you can lean on the areas that you're really able to offer there.
Awesome. Well, we're very close to the top of the hour now. So I am going to wrap our conversation there. Once again, thank you all for joining, and apologies for the chat not being up and running for the questions. I really appreciate folks putting their hand up and calling some of them out to us. All right, thanks everyone. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.